It happened in aisle 6, between the cereal boxes and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights, when time itself seemed to stop. Emma froze, her hand clutching a carton of milk as her eyes locked onto the man she once loved. Ryan stood just a few feet away, smiling softly as a little girl tugged at his sleeve. A girl who wasn't hers, her breath caught in her throat, memories flooding back like a tidal wave she never saw coming. In that single moment, every sleepless night, every lonely dinner, every broken promise came rushing back. The grocery store, once ordinary, now felt like a stage for the cruelest twist of fate. How do you look at someone who tore your world apart and still find your heart beating for them? She wanted to turn away, but her son's laughter echoed down the aisle, and suddenly, her past and present collided in the same breath. The air thickened as Emma tried to steady her breath. She felt her pulse in her throat, the weight of years pressing down with every heartbeat. She wanted to run, to vanish before Ryan noticed her, but something anchored her to that cold floor. The need to see if he'd changed. Was he happier now? Did he ever think of her? Her fingers brushed against the edge of the cart as Liam reached for her hand, grounding her in the now. It was absurd how love could decay and still echo through your veins like it never left. Ryan turned suddenly, his gaze catching hers. The moment stretched, too long, too raw. He looked startled, like someone caught between guilt and recognition. For a heartbeat, they were both trapped in the wreckage of what used to be, surrounded by bright packaging and dull memories. Neither spoke. The silence between them screamed louder than any argument they ever had. Liam's innocent voice broke the silence. "Mom, is that my dad?" he asked, his tone curious, not bitter. The question cut through her like a blade. She swallowed hard, her lips parting with no answer. She wasn't ready for this. Not here. Not now. Not in front of the man who had walked away from both of them. Emma managed a faint smile, brushing her son's hair as she whispered, "Just someone Mommy used to know." But inside, her chest burned. As Ryan began walking closer, her heart rails squeaked. The world felt unbearably small. She couldn't tell if she wanted to cry or scream, only that she wasn't ready for whatever came next. As Ryan's footsteps echoed closer, Emma's mind began to drift, not forward, but backward, to the day everything broke. She remembered the sound of slammed doors, the smell of rain that afternoon, and the way her hands trembled as she packed boxes in silence. Love hadn't died in one moment. It had withered quietly, over nights when words became weapons and apologies turned to excuses. Now standing in this store years later, the scent of rain still seemed to follow her, like a ghost that refused to leave. She had rebuilt her world, piece by piece, but one glance at him threatened to undo it all. Back then, she had begged him to stay, not for herself, but for the child they'd created together. But Ryan had already left long before he walked out the door. The silence between them had grown into something monstrous, something that consumed every ounce of warmth they once had. She remembered whispering, "We're still a family," only to hear him say, "Not anymore." Those words never stopped echoing. Even now, they played like static in the back of her mind as she faced him again. In the present, her chest tightened. The years had softened his features, but not the memory of what he'd done. He was smiling now, the same smile that once promised forever. She couldn't help but wonder if he'd found the peace she had fought so hard to earn. It wasn't jealousy. It was something deeper. Grief for the version of them that never survived. Emma blinked, and the flashbacks began to overlap with reality. The way he used to hold Liam's tiny hand, the lullabies he hummed when no one was listening, the way his eyes softened when their baby laughed. For years she'd convinced herself he didn't care. But now, seeing him with another child, she realized something worse. Maybe he did care. Just not for them anymore. Her chest ached as her eyes fell to Liam, still giggling, still innocent. The world hadn't broken him the way it had broken her. She realized she'd built her life around protecting that innocence, making sure her son never felt the emptiness she had carried since Ryan left. And yet here she was, trembling under the same roof as the man who'd once sworn to never leave. She inhaled deeply, gripping the cart tighter. She knew she couldn't run from this moment any longer. Ryan stopped a few feet away. For a split second, neither of them moved, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Emma forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes, pretending this was casual, pretending her heart wasn't beating loud enough to shake the shelves. Ryan's eyes softened, like he wasn't sure if he should speak. The silence between them was heavy, filled with everything they'd never said. She wanted to ask why, to ask if he'd ever looked back. But instead she just said, "Hey." One word, small and sharp, cutting through years of unspoken hurt. Ryan nodded awkwardly. "Didn't think I'd see you here," he said with that half-smile she once loved, the one that used to melt her resolve. She laughed faintly, a sound that came out more like a sigh. "Yeah, small town," she managed. The words were safe, polite. Armor thinly disguised as small talk. Every second felt like walking barefoot on broken glass. Sophie peeked at Emma curiously, her little fingers clutching Ryan's jacket. "She's beautiful," Emma almost said, but bit her tongue. The words wouldn't mean what they sounded like. She looked at Ryan's hand resting gently on the child's shoulder and felt something twist inside her. Not jealousy, not even anger, but the ache of seeing him become the man she once needed him to be, just too late. Ryan finally looked at Liam, recognition flickering in his eyes like a forgotten flame. "He's grown," he said softly, voice almost breaking. Emma nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Yeah, he has." For a moment, Ryan's eyes glistened, and the weight of lost years hung between them. She wondered if he thought about the birthdays he missed, the nights she stayed up alone when their boy had fevers, the mornings she smiled, so he wouldn't see her cry. "Take care, Emma," Ryan said finally, his tone too gentle, too final. She nodded, forcing herself not to look back as he turned away. His cart rolled down the aisle, the sound of the wheels fading like an old memory, leaving her for the last time. And yet, when the silence returned, it wasn't empty. It was freeing. For the first time, she felt the faintest hint of peace, though her hands were still trembling. Maybe the hardest part of healing wasn't letting go of someone. It was forgiving yourself for still feeling something when they're gone. Just as Emma turned to leave, Ryan's voice stopped her. "Emma, wait." It wasn't commanding. It was trembling, almost pleading. She froze, exhaling slowly before turning back. His face carried the same mix of guilt and softness that once made her believe he'd always come home. "I didn't expect to see you," he said quietly. She forced a nod. "Life's full of surprises," she replied, the corners of her lips barely curving. Her tone was calm, but her heartbeat wasn't. He took a hesitant step closer, eyes flickering toward Liam. "He looks happy," he murmured. "You did good, Em." The nickname made her flinch. No one had called her that in years. She swallowed hard, the compliment landing heavier than any insult. "Yeah," she whispered, her voice steady but cracked at the edges. "He's my whole world." And in that instant, Ryan looked like he wanted to say 1,000 things. All the apologies, all the regret, but the words stayed trapped behind his lips. "I wasn't ready back then," Ryan said suddenly, the words spilling out like a confession. Emma blinked, her eyes narrowing slightly. "And you think I was?" she asked softly. The question wasn't bitter. It was exhausted. "I didn't have the choice to leave, Ryan. I had to be ready." The silence after that line was devastating. His shoulders dropped, guilt written all over him. For the first time, he couldn't hide behind excuses. Ryan's voice cracked. "I think about him, about you, more than you know." Emma stared at him, searching for sincerity. "Then why didn't you come back?" she whispered. His lips parted, but no answer came, only silence. Thick and final. In that stillness, she realized she didn't need one. His absence had already told her everything years ago. After a long pause, Emma stepped closer, her voice steady. "You know what's crazy," she said. "I don't hate you anymore." Ryan looked up, startled. "I used to," she continued, her tone calm, almost tender. "But hating you kept me stuck. And I can't live there anymore." For a second, she thought she saw relief flicker in his eyes, not because she forgave him, but because she finally set him free. "Goodbye, Ryan." She turned the cart and walked away, her son's small hand reaching for hers. For the first time, she didn't feel broken. She felt finished. The automatic doors slid open, letting in the cool breath of late morning air. Emma pushed the cart forward slowly, each wheel creaking against the pavement. For the first time in years, she didn't feel chased by memories. The moment Ryan faded behind her, something inside her loosened, like she'd been carrying a stone in her chest and had finally set it down. Liam was humming a song beside her, his voice light and off-key, and it felt like music. That's when she realized she didn't need closure from him. She already had it from the life she'd built on her own. As she loaded the groceries into her old car, Emma caught her reflection in the window. For a moment, she almost didn't recognize herself. The woman who used to cry herself to sleep, the one who thought she wasn't enough. Now, her reflection looked older but stronger, with eyes that had seen loss and kept going anyway. She smiled faintly, realizing she didn't just survive the heartbreak. She rebuilt her world from its ashes. "Mommy, can we go to the park after this?" Liam asked, eyes bright with anticipation. Emma looked at him and nodded, her heart swelling. "Yeah, baby, we can." That simple exchange grounded her more than any closure ever could. Love, she realized, wasn't about who stayed or who left. It was about who showed up, day after day, when no one else did. And she had always shown. Driving home, she glanced in the rearview mirror and caught a fleeting glimpse of Ryan in the parking lot, buckling Sophie into his car seat. He looked tired, not in the way that comes from sleepless nights, but from carrying regrets. Their eyes met one last time through the glass. She didn't wave, didn't smile. She simply breathed, exhaled everything she'd been holding, and turned the corner without looking back. The road stretched out ahead, open and quiet. Liam hummed again, his voice filling the silence. Emma smiled as the wind rushed through the open window, the scent of fresh air replacing the heavy stillness she'd carried for so long. This was peace, not the loud, cinematic kind, but the kind that whispers, "You made it." She reached across the console and took her son's tiny hand in hers, knowing that was the only future she needed to chase. The car engine hummed softly as Emma parked at the edge of a quiet overlook just outside town. Liam had fallen asleep in the back seat, his head resting against his little backpack. The world outside was still. Fields stretching under a wide blue sky, leaves whispering in the wind. Emma's fingers trembled on the steering wheel. For hours, she'd held herself together. Now, the mask began to crack. Every emotion she'd buried, the years of being strong, the nights of pretending not to miss him, came rushing up all at once. She pressed her palms to her face and finally let go. The sobs came quietly, not violent. Just deep, aching waves of relief. Tears slipped through her fingers, staining her lap, and for once, she didn't stop them. It wasn't weakness, it was release. She wasn't crying for him anymore. She was crying for every version of herself that had stayed silent when she should have screamed, that had smiled when she should have rested. When the tears finally slowed, she leaned back and looked out at the horizon. The sky was painted in fading golds and soft blues, a world still moving forward, even when she'd felt stuck. A quiet smile touched her lips, fragile but real. She whispered to herself, "You did it." Those 3 words weren't about survival anymore. They were about becoming whole again. She turned to look at Liam, still asleep, his small chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm. A soft laugh escaped her. That kind of laugh that comes after crying too hard. "You saved me, kid," she whispered. She thought of all the nights she'd read him stories, all the mornings they'd shared burnt toast and laughter, every sacrifice, every lonely evening. It had led here. And somehow, that made it all worth it. Emma rolled down the window and let the cool wind touch her face. It carried the smell of earth, grass, and something new, freedom. She inhaled deeply and whispered one last time, not to Ryan, but to herself, "I forgive you." The words drifted into the wind, disappearing into the distance. For the first time in years, the silence inside her didn't echo. It just rested. By the time Emma pulled into her driveway, the sky had melted into a soft lavender dusk. The house looked the same, the chipped mailbox, the small porch light flickering. But something inside her had changed. She unbuckled Liam gently, lifting his sleepy body into her arms, his head nestled against her shoulder, warm and trusting. The air smelled of rain and cut grass, familiar and forgiving. For years she'd come home to silence. Tonight, it felt like coming home to peace. "Or, nice say to me, aren't you my descendant?" Inside, she laid Liam on the couch and tucked a blanket around him. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, the same sound she used to hate when the house felt empty. But now it was comforting. Proof of life, of ordinary peace. She sat beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. There was no ache in her chest anymore, only gratitude. Sometimes healing doesn't arrive in a grand moment. Sometimes it just slips in quietly when you stop expecting it. Later, she walked into the kitchen, poured herself a cup of tea, and leaned against the counter. The reflection in the window showed a woman who had been broken and rebuilt, not perfectly, but beautifully. She smiled. A real one this time, the kind that starts slow and stays. For the first time, she didn't feel the need to be strong. She already was. She wandered to Liam's room and stood by the doorway, watching him sleep. His little hand clutched a toy car, his lips curved in a dream smile. A quiet tear slid down her cheek, not of sadness, but gratitude. Every hardship, every sleepless night, every lonely meal had led here. She had loved through loss and built something unbreakable from it, herself. Outside, the night deepened. Emma stepped onto the porch, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. The street was silent except for the rustle of leaves. She looked up at the stars, bright, endless, forgiving, and let a small, knowing smile form. The world hadn't given her an easy story, but it had given her a meaningful one. And in that moment, she understood that healing wasn't the end of pain. It was learning to love again despite it.